Welcome, everyone. My today's guest is Dr. Beth Hetva, author of the book Betrayal, Trust, and Forgiveness. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Jacob. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you for coming and having a time for this short interview because we are preparing an online workshop for the Czech audience. And I wanted to have like more personal meeting with you just to have a glimpse of idea how did you get to this kind of work, because betrayal is a big topic worldwide happening nowadays. So how was your journey? How did you get to this point?
It's interesting. I was taking a course with a fellow named Brew Joy, who was doing a process in which we were being guided to work with kind of like an initiatory process. And I had already been researching initiation and cross-cultural rites of initiation. So this was kind of up my alley. And anyway, long story short, I hit a place where I was doing some inner work that took me back to a wound that awakened me. We were doing shadow work, looking into our shadow and the unresolved things in our own experiences that we were projecting onto others. And I realized that at the core of my pain and the shadow was the experience of betrayal. And that was like the seed that opened it, was how what we project out onto others, our harsh judgments, our criticisms, our injuries, create pain for us, but also create pain for other people. And then as I began to work with the experience of my own betrayals, I started noticing in my clinical practice that just about every person who I was working with had some kind of a betrayal story, whether it was childhood wounds or infidelity or being left by a lover, being lied to, or job layoffs. There were all kinds of things. So then I began to research the cross-cultural universal themes within betrayal. When I first began working on this, betrayal wasn't even a topic. I started researching this in the late 80s. So, and in the early 90s, my first book came out in 1992. And so what I became aware of is that in cross-cultural rites of passage, oftentimes initiatory ceremonial rites of passage often begin with a shock and an experience of separation that creates an existential crisis launched by an experience of betrayal of some sort or another. And then in following that pattern through, I realized that our reactions to betrayal follow a very particular pattern, no matter what the betrayal is. And in addition, the process of healing has a very specific pattern as well that follows this form of an initiatory rite of passage. And I came to the conclusion that betrayal is the initiation of our day. And I often say that in our lives today, life is our teacher. And first we get the test, and then we get the teaching.
Okay. And I've read that the first book was The Journey from the Betrayal to Trust, right?
That's right.
And when you were editing it for the second or third,
Second
you
edition, actually.
second edition, you added some chapters, right?
I did, on forgiveness in particular. I don't know how I
Okay.
missed that the first time.
Okay. What led you to make the book bigger, or doing second edition a bit different? Because as I can feel here in Czech, we have some history with the Second World War. We were quite in the middle of it, and there the betrayal topic is quite big here, I guess. I think it's everywhere, it's worldwide, right? But for Czechs, it's really connected to the war which is happening right now.
Yes.
So what is like the easiest way how to work with the old betrayal topic and not being triggered by the nowadays topic?
Right. So this is a really important question because from the perspective that I was working with, actually, every betrayal injury And in my book, Betrayal, Trust, and Forgiveness, I go all the way from the personal to the interpersonal, to body betrayals, health, accidents, illness, aging, to self-betrayal when we don't listen to ourselves or act on what we know, to betrayals of society, which are actually, each betrayal is a gateway to a greater expanded state of consciousness, a trauma-induced spiritual awakening. And so what's happened with World War II and the current circumstance is we get caught in the betrayal experience. And in the heat of a crisis, we often will have a shock that actually awakens us to a degree, but then we go back to our daily lives and we start adapting to the conditions around us. And we don't know how to integrate that deeper truth of our spiritual nature and the wholeness of who we are. So betrayal of society, actually, as we heal the injuries of our earlier wounds, mother betrayal wounds teach us to connect with an inner knowing source that knows what we need and knows better than anybody else, even better than our own mothers. And then, because actually our mothers are bound to betray us too. It's just kind of the nature of things. Father betrayal wounds take us into the gateway of self-direction and purpose in life. Interpersonal relationship betrayal wounds injure the feeling of partnership and wholeness and connection. And so they are the gateway to the union between our inner true self and our ordinary, humble, flawed personality self.
Right. You just mentioned. Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
No.
go ahead.
You just mentioned one thing that people are quite often not aware that they are going through the betrayal. You are working with the clients also on this topic, right?
Yes.
What is the probably easiest or best way how to look at it, or how to find what kind of betrayal trauma or betrayal issue I have, so I can start working on it? Because you are talking about self-betrayal, social betrayal. Is it important to divide it and find a specific one, or working on the betrayal itself?
Yeah, so I want to return to that because I want to really answer your question about society, but to help you understand how you know when you're feeling betrayed and what it's about. It's the experience that you have. It's usually an indication of where you feel stuck emotionally, in righteous resentment. And if you find yourself getting caught in gossip, if you find yourself projecting negative criticism onto other people, those are usually indications of a feeling of betrayal. Or if you find that you're really cynical, you've generalized the negative to other people. And this is what, is rampant in our world today: prejudice, racism, social conflict. Those Russians, for the other side, those Ukrainians, we generalize the negative, right? So those are indication that there are unhealed betrayal wounds. And then, of course, the self-betrayal is when we feel like we can no longer trust ourselves. We doubt ourselves. We doubt our purpose or mission in life. And then the other sign of feeling betrayed is, instead of trust, we succumb to trying to protect ourselves to create safety through control and manipulation, through gaining contracts and agreements. And that's really as far that experience that we need to make sure that you're going to do what I say you're going to want you to do to take care of myself. That's as far from trust as we can get. And so it's really about learning that we have a source inside of us that can help us through absolutely every experience in life and can bring us into a state of inner equanimity, peace, healing, presence that returns us to remembering who we are and what we're here for, and making the commitment to bring our true selves into the world as agents, especially at this time in history, agents of healing and transformation, particularly the transformation of social consciousness, because our social consciousness is pretty limited. So when we're looking, I want to circle back to betrayal of society. So each experience of betrayal becomes a gateway to an expanded perspective. Our personal injuries prepare us when we heal them to become emissaries of healing, not only for ourselves and in our interpersonal relationships, but for society. And so the injuries from society are actually gateways to the family of humanity, where we recognize how every single one of us is a vulnerable human being. And when we can get back into that experience of, all of us have needs, all of us have a sense of purpose, all of us have a desire to be whole, all of us have a desire to bring our gifts into this world. That's the beginning of the healing of society, when we begin to join together with others of like mind who are also on the same path or mission, if you will, to bring healing into our world. And that prepares us to move together collectively, to actually heal the biggest challenges in our world right now, climate anxiety and environmental disasters, as well as humanitarian disasters. So actually, each chapter in my book is about each of those betrayals and how they lead to each other.
Mm.
And I have found that lots of people only get as far as the first 4 or 5 chapters. But from what you're saying, particularly in the Czech Republic, I think the later chapters are going to be essential.
Mm. And also, I just realized that right now, with the situation in Ukraine, it's quite strange to see people how they are divided into two groups. It's always visible that when there is a conflict, people are taking sides. But in a conflict, this is not the solution. What would you suggest as a solution for not taking a side, not supporting a war with a war? If you, it's like fighting for peace, but it's still fighting. So, what would be your suggestion for a single person? What I can do for changing this?
Well, so this is where it's really important to reconnect with what is the underlying value that is motivating you to take sides.
Mm,
Because underneath your position, there's something else going on, a deeper need or desire. And if you can discover what that is for yourself and then connect with the part of you that is able to take care of your own needs and guide you on how to fulfill your deepest dreams and desires, you can then begin to ask for guidance. How do I fulfill those in
mm,
relationship to society? How do I become a force that is bringing forth the healing that we all need right now? Because we all have needs,
mm,
every single human being. And how do we address those in a way that bring forward the compassion as well as the clarity about boundaries? We need
mm.
to be clear about our boundaries as well. The biggest challenge is, how do we stand in the presence of differences without making the other person wrong for being different than us? That's
Yeah,
the big thing.
that's right. Um, as you has been talking about the betrayal, that there is a journey from betrayal to forgiveness. Can you somehow um, can you tell the main steps on the journey? The main steps on this path, so people can at least feel into it before they buy the book. They can feel
Okay.
into it if this work is for them, because I think it's really useful.
Yes, absolutely. So I use the pattern of healing that we find in the journey of initiation and a ceremonial rite of passage. But what's so fascinating is, though, and there are 5 basic steps, but those same 5 basic steps also relate to recovery from mass disaster.
Mm.
And what we're really looking at right now in Ukraine, and with the influx of refugees into the Czech Republic, is a mass disaster. And so we might want to look at both of those and see what the challenges are in each domain on a personal level that prepares us to do the healing at the mass level. Let's start with that.
Mm.
So, first, we experience a shock of separation, an existential crisis, where our needs, our expectations, our sense of security and safety are completely dashed. That leads to the next stage very quickly. After the shock, loneliness, helplessness, hopelessness, doubts, and worries, which is the first stage. That's how you know you're in an existential
Mm.
crisis. Then you move on to what I call rites of purification and the many ordeals of betrayal. And the ordeals are mental and emotional. They are also physical when it comes to things like mass disaster, being without a home, being without security. We confront these ordeals in a way that they evoke all of our fears and fears of loss. And if we don't find a way to respond to our basic sense of fear and security, insecurity, we move immediately into the third stage, which is the deepening of the existential crisis and the confrontation with a symbolic death, which is an ego death, where our sense of who we are and what we're here for and what life is about begin to dissolve. First, we go through denial, anger, we try to justify where we are. There are all kinds of very specific reactions that I go through in my book in each chapter, depending on what we're dealing with. But the symbolic death is what's universal. However, we don't make it through symbolic death by trying to figure it out. No matter how hard we try, whatever happened happened just like it did. And that is like so completely depressing. So when you hit the place of real grief and you're saying to yourself, when is this going to end? You know that you're moving through the symbolic death, which is designed to teach you to accept yourself and your vulnerabilities, and the nature of being human. Our human condition is very vulnerable when you get right down to it. And when we can accept ourselves, all of who we are, our anger, our hurt, our joys, our sorrows, it's almost as though something else opens and we begin to awaken to the nature of reality, not just human reality, but the nature of reality, which awakens us to an insight and understanding about who we are and what we're here for and our relationship to something much larger than us. And the discovery of a creative source inside of us that can create value, meaning, healing out of the worst experiences of our lives. That creative source within us recreates us, inspires us, brings us forward in a new way, returns us, if you will, to our mission, our purpose, and what we were born for to begin with. Why am I going through this? And, what did the Creator have in mind for me?
Mm.
And that brings us to renewal and rebirth. And we are inspired to bring forth the discovery of what we have learned for our own sake, but also for the sake of others. We discover that the injuries we suffered are for giving us an opportunity to come to know ourselves so much better, and then to give forth the gifts of who we truly are, the self that we truly can trust. So it's no longer about trusting outside, it's about trusting the process of life that returns us over and over and over again to that inner creative source that inspires us to bring our gifts forward. And how we do that has its own process. It's like the process of birth, which is a whole other story that I think is a really important story. And that's also outlined in each chapter.
Mm, mm. Thank you for that. I
That
think
was a
it's
little
also,
lecture. I hope that was a long answer
well,
to a
no,
very
no, no, no. It's absolutely perfect. It reminded me that it also correlate with meeting with some kind of traumatic situation. If you are going through some traumatic situation, and it can be a car crash, it can be death of someone close to you. You are also going through the stages. They are quite similar, as you said, with this. So
Yes, they
thank you
are.
for,
Actually, they correlate perfectly.
yeah.
It's just that the ancient world developed ceremonies of initiation to require us to develop the emotional and spiritual maturity
Mm,
to understand our relationship to the mysteries of not being in control of the universe.
mm. Yeah.
And it's natural. You're exactly right. Post traumatic growth is what it's called now.
Mm. It's really probably the reason why we are going through the situation like this, that the rites of passage has disappeared from the world, basically. I don't know probably anyone. I mean, I have a lot of friends, I know a lot of teachers, but I didn't hear that somebody is doing rites of passages for children, for
Well, they
example, or
exist in many cultures, actually.
yeah,
Indigenous cultures have maintained rites of passage.
yeah.
The Jewish culture still has its rite of passage called the bar and bat mitzvah. They have the rite
Mm,
of passage at birth, which is, and we all go through the rite of passage of marriage,
mm,
where we are no longer an individual and our parent's child. We now are a partner to someone else in union with someone.
mm.
Because we haven't gone through the earlier ones, we don't know how to surrender to the reality that now we have to deal with a whole other human being who is different than us.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
The thing I was thinking wasn't about those classical rites of passages, but nobody teaches us how to go through lost or through the traumatic experience, and that's why I said that they
well, they're not
disappear. Yeah,
ritualized anymore in the
yeah,
West,
yeah. That's
unfortunately.
how I meant it.
I agree with you, Jacob. I think the real issue, especially in the West, is we have disconnected from our inner wisdom source
Mm,
because of centuries and millennia of oppression that stretches all the way back to the Roman rule and conquering of Europe, which then, split between the Pope and Constantine. And then religion became another way of conquering and eliminating the indigenous cultural traditions that maintained those rites of passage. But we're in the phase right now of the renewal and rebirth. And, really, we go through these periods that look like darkness. And what's important to remember is that when we look at life in the bigger picture of life, plants that absorb sunlight do the work of photosynthesis and growth in the darkness. The same is true for us. We're in the process right now of integrating our greatest potential so that we can then blossom and flower and bloom and bring forward the next wave, but not just from our own little cultural perspectives where we're also different. We're discovering the universal rites of passage that are based on cross-cultural ethical principles that inspire us to be in relationship to each other and our earth in whole new ways. That's what this rite of passage is about.
mm. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because this makes sense in the whole world, basically. If we are cooperating together, it's easier to get into more lighter place instead of being in the dark alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and I just got a wave of the beauty that's coming and is already here in each of us.
It's always great to see that people from different tradition, different countries are going to the same spot from a different perspectives. There are many kind of workshops, many kind of approaches with the clients. How can people get right into the middle? And in the middle is always reconnecting with the inner self. And it's beautiful to see that you can be psychologist, you can be a shaman, you can be anyone who is working with people, and still it's going on the one place, which is
Yes,
some kind of reconnection. But it's beautiful.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And there is the forgiveness, right?
Right. And that's
At
again,
the
it's
end.
for exactly the
Yeah.
forgiveness. At first, it's about the trust.
Mm,
We discover who and what we can genuinely trust. That source within us, that creative, resilient spirit that is truly always there for us. The one we can trust is within us and guides us in our actions in the world. And when we have that experience, that's when we can give forth the gift of who we are. And that's where the forgiveness comes in. It's again,
mm,
the experiences are forgiving us an opportunity to discover our true self, the one we can trust,
mm,
and then to give that to other people.
mm. Thank you for saying that. What would you like to say to Czech audience where to start working on their own betrayal?
Yeah.
Because where is the beginning? What is the base step or the first step when you want to start working on this?
Right. So in the book, and I'm sorry to say I don't have the Czech version because mail is so slow between our countries. So people will find a map that is
Okay.
an image of the journey from betrayal to trust. I don't know, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that. I just saw it also on the Czech version because I was working on it online.
Excellent. So
So,
the
yeah.
first thing someone can do is they can open to this page, and under each of the 5 steps of initiation, including the renewal and rebirth, are the reactions that we go through and what we need to transform them, which is this middle place of new knowledge that inspires our renewal and rebirth. And that allows us to be in the world in a whole new way.
Mm,
So chances are, if you're feeling betrayed, you're probably somewhere in here. Okay. Then, unless you already are beginning to gain insight and guidance from your own inner source, but you might be flipping back and forth. It might not be your first initiation, for
mm,
example.
mm,
But you might wonder, am I in the birth transition or the death transition? They look a lot the same.
mm,
So the next thing to do is once you discover where you are, notice if the injury or wound is in relationship to a person, to a situation, to society. I always recommend reading chapter 1 first because it gives you the whole journey.
mm.
And that's pretty much what the workshop is going to be about, giving people the tools that can allow them to identify where they are and specific methods and how to respond to each of the stages.
Great.
Yeah, but the other piece, because of the mass disaster, when I went to Indonesia to help with recovery from the tsunami and civil war, I was invited to develop a recovery from trauma, mass disaster trauma training for local psychologists. This is one of the things that I added to the book in the 2013 edition,
Mm,
because by that time there had been so many more disasters. So this is what I call a, whoopsie, sorry about that, spiritually directed protocol for recovery from trauma. And it has 5 stages that correlate to the experience of recovery from mass trauma.
mm,
and when I'm running groups, and if any of the people who are coming are therapists or healers or group facilitators, every group I run always goes through these 5 stages, even if it's only a 2-hour workshop, where we start with connecting with ourselves
Mm,
and our own spiritual resources. And we do that in so many ways, prayer, breath work, movement, song, dance, you name it. Every culture has its way to connect.
mm,
And of course, connecting with each other. And then gaining new knowledge through developing our witness, what might be called mindful awareness. And then really honoring our emotional beings, sharing our feelings, breaking through the feeling of isolation, which then can become a gateway to insight and understanding through embodied awareness, through using our intuition, our inner resources to gain direct guidance on what we need for our own healing. And then the last stage is empowerment. What can you do? What action can you take in your life that will nourish and nurture the self care? And how do you
mm,
take that out to your community,
mm.
to others, and empower others to do their own journey from betrayal to trust, if you will?
Well, to be honest, I'm looking forward to it already. Because just how you said the last part exactly, you know, I think there will totally be some therapists or people who are running the groups here because this topic is quite alive, I think, here. So I guess people who are running groups will want to know what to do right now. So yeah, I'm already excited.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. I hope we covered everything, and if not, we can do another call for sure.
Absolutely.
And
And I don't know if you're doing anything like book readings to let people know what's in the book or Q&As, but I'd be happy to do that as well.
okay.
Whatever supports it, to me, it's so important right now for each of us to find a way through these traumas so that we can be whole and help others discover that they are also at the essence and core of their being already whole
Hmm,
instead of shattered, and
hmm.
how to do that repair work so that we can do the bigger work of repairing our communities, our world, and our relationship to our exquisitely beautiful earth
Hmm. All together.
all together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Jacob. Thank you.